Hello everyone, welcome to Tech Brains, simple solutions for complex problems. Today we will discuss about Spring Framework. What is Spring Framework? What are the problems Spring is trying to solve for the developers? And we'll also discuss about the history of Spring releases. What is Spring Framework? Spring Framework is one of the most popular application development framework for enterprise Java. There are millions of developers around the world use Spring Framework to create high performance, easily testable, maintainable and reusable code. Spring is an open source application platform for Java. It was initially released in the year 2003. Spring is lightweight and it is POJO based. So POJO stands for plain old Java object. So Spring is built out of the frustrations of JTE development. Spring is built around the best practices. So there are a lot of design patterns that will be incorporated without even we realizing that we are using them. Things like singletons, factories, abstract factories, template methods, all those best practices are built into the code without even realizing us. The Spring Framework started as an inversion of control container. So this technique we often called as dependency injection. So this was conceived to reduce or replace some of the complex configurations of the Java Enterprise Edition. So Spring was initially started as how do we better work with EJBs, Enterprise Java Beans. Later it was turned to be how can we develop the enterprise Java applications without using EJBs. So it's kind of transitioned into how can I do the development without EJBs completely. So Spring enabled us to do the enterprise development without using the application server. So this is one of the biggest advantage. Previously for the enterprise applications we had to use application servers, but now we can use Tomcat. Even though the Tomcat is just a web server, we can use Tomcat for deploying enterprise applications. What are the problems Spring is trying to solve? Whenever I'm going to introduce another framework or a tool into my code base, we wanted to look and see what it's actually buying us. There are few questions that I will ask myself. What is it trying to solve for me? Spring brings us at the table quite a few things. It increases our testability, it increases our maintainability, it also helps us with the scalability. It decouples things and makes it so that we can add caching layers and other layers without disturbing the existing application code. It reduces code complexity. The important aspect is it puts focus on business. The business does not actually care about what frameworks we are using. Spring helps us getting complex code done faster, makes it more maintainable, testable, and helps remove the complexity. That makes it easier for the developers. As I mentioned earlier, Spring initially started as inversion of control container, and we call this technique as dependency injection. What is dependency injection? Dependency injection is simply removing the hard-coded wiring from your application and using a framework to inject the dependency and resources where they are needed. Let's take a look at this slide here. So I talked about business focus. So what is business focus? If you look at this method is to get a user by user ID. So it will take an user ID and then it finally returns a user object. So what it is doing here, if you see, we have a connection, we have prepared statement, we have result set, we have SQL query. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to get ID, first name, last name, address from the user table, and we are passing the ID. Okay, and then we have the connection URL, we have driver manager, and then we are setting the value to the prepared statement, we are executing the prepared statement. Once we get the result set, we are setting those values back to user object and then returning this user. And if you look at this try catch, and there is a big finally block, so we are handling all the resources. We have to close all the result set connection, we have to handle all the exceptions and so on. Okay, if we have to achieve the similar functionality using Spring framework, we will do it like this. See here, so we have get user by ID, and then we use entity manager here. We'll just get the user and we pass the ID. So this returns exactly the user ID. But if you look at this big code, so this is in Spring, it can be achieved without a lot of complications. So the handling of all the resources, all that will be taken care by Spring framework itself. So that is where it gives the developers the flexibility to focus on the business. Okay, so now we will look at the history of Spring releases. What are all the different releases, what all different features it has released. So Spring has released their milestone release in the year 2003. So the major focus at that point is interface driven development and overcoming the complexities of JTE development. And in the year 2004, they have released their 1.4 release. They have started introducing Spring MVC, and then they've integrated Hibernate and other tools into the framework. In the year 2006, Spring has won Jolt Productivity Award for the version 1.2.6. So this is one big achievement for Spring. And then in the same year 2006, they have released their 2.0 release. Even though there are not major changes, they have made a lot of improvements to the existing framework, and they did their security fixes and so on. So till that point, all the configuration for Spring was in XML. In the year 2007, they have released their 2.5 version. So there was heavy focus on the annotation driven development. So prior to this, we used to call the Spring developers as XML developers because all the configurations was too heavy on the XML. In the 2009, they have released their 3.0 release, and in the 3.0, the major focus was all the configuration can be done on Java based, and they have released their 3.1 in the year 2011, 3.2.5 in 2013, then they have released their 4.0 in the year 2013. So they have added the compatibility for Java 6, Java 7 and Java 8, and they have added support for WebSockets, they have added support for Groovy and so on. And in the year 2017, they have released their Spring 5.0. So the major focus is on the reactive programming, and they've added support for Kotlin and JUnit 5 support into Spring framework. What next? So let's start creating applications based on Spring framework. Thank you for watching. Please follow me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. I'll try to answer any of your questions. Also, like, share, comment and subscribe to TechBrains. Happy learning. Thank you.